It was one of those crisp autumn mornings when the air feels fresh and the world seems to slow down just a little. I was sitting on my porch, wrapped in a cozy sweater, sipping my coffee and watching the neighborhood come to life. Kids were heading to school, cars were pulling out of driveways, and the sun was casting a golden glow over everything. It was peaceful, until Karen showed up. Karen was the HOA president, and she took her job very seriously. Too seriously, if you ask me. She was the kind of person who carried a ruler to measure grass and a magnifying glass to inspect paint colors. Nothing ever seemed to make her happy, and she had a way of turning the smallest things into big problems. That morning, she was marching toward Marcus's house, her clipboard clutched tightly in her hand and her face set in that familiar scowl. Marcus had moved into the neighborhood about 6 months ago. He was a quiet man, maybe in his late 30s, with a warm smile and a gentle demeanor. He kept to himself mostly, but he was always friendly when we crossed paths. He'd wave from his porch or nod hello when he was out watering his plants. His house was always immaculate, the lawn perfectly trimmed, the flower beds neat, the fence freshly painted. But none of that seemed to matter to Karen. I watched as she knocked on his door, her knuckles rapping sharply against the wood. When Marcus opened it, she didn't even bother with a greeting. "Your trash cans were out too early this morning," she said, her voice sharp and loud enough for me to hear from across the street. "And your fence is the wrong shade of white. It's a violation of the HOA rules. You need to fix it immediately, or there will be consequences." Marcus stood there, calm as ever. He nodded, said something I couldn't quite hear, and closed the door. Karen huffed, scribbled something on her clipboard, and marched away. I shook my head, feeling a mix of frustration and pity. Karen had been like this for as long as I could remember, always nitpicking, always finding something wrong. But this time, it felt different. This time, it felt personal. A few weeks later, it happened again. This time, Karen was yelling. I could hear her from my kitchen window. "You can't park your truck here. It's against the rules, and your grass is too long. This is unacceptable." Marcus tried to explain, but Karen wasn't having it. "If you can't follow the rules, maybe you don't belong here," she snapped. My heart sank. I knew what she was really saying. It wasn't about the grass or the truck. It was about Marcus. He was different, and Karen didn't like different. The next day, I saw Marcus outside, trimming his grass and repainting his fence. He looked tired, but he didn't complain. I wanted to say something, to tell him he didn't deserve this, but I didn't. I just watched, feeling helpless and guilty for not speaking up. Then, one Saturday morning, everything changed. Karen showed up at Marcus's door again, this time with a stack of papers in her hand. "This is your final warning," she said, her voice cold and clipped. "If you don't comply with the rules, we'll have no choice but to start eviction proceedings." Marcus looked at her for a long moment. Then he smiled, a sad, knowing smile. "Eviction proceedings?" he said, his voice calm but firm. "You can't evict me, Karen. I own this house, and actually, I own yours too." Karen froze. "What are you talking about?" she snapped, her voice rising. Marcus reached inside and came back with a folder. He handed it to her. "I bought this house 6 months ago," he said. "And last month, I bought yours. You've been renting from me this whole time." Karen's face turned red, then white. She flipped through the papers, her hands shaking. This can't be right," she stammered. "It's right," Marcus said. "And since you've been so concerned about the rules, let me remind you of one. As the property owner, I have the right to terminate your lease if you violate the terms. And harassing me? That's a violation." Karen looked like she'd been slapped. She stumbled back, muttering something about calling her lawyer. Marcus just stood there, calm as ever, watching her go. I couldn't help but smile. For the first time in years, Karen was speechless. And Marcus? He went back inside, leaving the rest of us to wonder how many other surprises he had up his sleeve. That night, I saw him on his porch, sitting in the glow of the setting sun. I walked over, finally finding the courage to say something. "That was something else," I said. He looked at me and smiled. "Sometimes," he said, "people need a reminder that the world doesn't revolve around them." I nodded, feeling a lump in my throat. "I'm sorry I didn't say anything sooner," I said. "I should have stood up for you." Marcus shook his head. "You don't have to apologize," he said. "But maybe next time, Don't wait so long to do the right thing. I promised I wouldn't. And as I walked back to my house, I realized something. Marcus wasn't just a homeowner, he was a teacher. And Karen? Well, she'd just learned one of the hardest lessons of all. Over the next few weeks, things changed in the neighborhood. Karen stepped down as HOA president, and the new board was more relaxed and fair. Marcus kept to himself as always, but there was a new respect for him in the air. And me? I learned something too. I learned that standing by and doing nothing can be just as harmful as being the one causing the harm. Marcus's quiet strength had shaken the foundation of our little community, and in doing so, he'd given us all a chance to be better. And for that, I'll always be grateful. Hey everyone, if this story moved you, if it made you think, or if it reminded you why we need to keep having these conversations, please take a moment to like this video. It really helps spread awareness. I'd love to hear your thoughts, so drop a comment below. Have you ever witnessed or experienced something like this? Let's talk about it. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be told, make sure to subscribe to the channel. We're here to share real, powerful stories that need to be heard. Lastly, share this with your friends and family. The more people who see this, the more we can bring awareness and change. Thank you for watching and being part of this journey. Let's keep pushing forward, together.